Did you know that Rachel Zegler, the lead in The Hunger Games, originally turned it down?
She did?
She turned the part down.
But she was the lead. So what happened?
There's a whole story behind that that we're going to get to in this episode of Share Your Screen. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Hello. Hi, I'm Nicky.
Thank you. I'm Coco Mocoe. And thank you guys so much for all of the ratings, the reviews that have been coming in, the amazing comments on YouTube that give us video ideas. They tell us what they want us to talk about. And I love the community.
Me too.
We are going to today be talking about some Hunger Games lore, and just there's so much interesting thing. One of my favorite things to research whenever new movies come out that are trending and stuff is casting.
Interesting.
It's so interesting to find out why certain people got cast, like maybe who tried out and didn't get it.
Totally. I love those. God, I can't remember the name of the interview. Notes on a Scene, where it's the director. I think it's for like Vanity Fair, where they like review the scene and they talk about like, there was one of Jacob Elordi in Saltburn where she was essentially talking about like why I wanted this person for this role and stuff like that.
Wow.
Like, or like this was the scene that they had to do in their audition and stuff like that. I think things like that is so interesting in the way that like you hear directors and actors describe their characters.
Did you see what they said about Saltburn? Because I really want to see that movie.
I want to see it so bad. She was just talking about how she really liked that Jacob Elordi was like good at being a very normal guy. Because the whole point of the movie is it's like somebody who's like very innocent but then turns sinister. And she felt like everybody was either like too innocent or too sinister. And she liked that he could like really toe this line of like being, which I think is really true if you think about like Nate Jacobs and Euphoria and stuff. Like he kind of does, he's really good at that sort of
you feel bad.
Yeah, like you know that they're bad, but you kind of empathize with them.
Yeah. Jacob Elordi also comes up in this podcast episode.
The Jacob Elordi Rachel Zegler comparison is very interesting. I've been seeing so much discourse about it online, and I'm very excited to talk about it with you.
Yeah. So we're gonna get into all of that now. Before we get into casting, I do want to just give a little bit context into the movie because I've seen it. I know you haven't seen it yet.
Have you read the books?
I haven't, but I really, after seeing the movie, I actually want to go back and read.
I got all 3 of them in hardcover, baby.
Really?
You can have them.
Did you get the new one that recently came out?
No, I only read the Hunger
original.
Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay.
Yeah, and Susan Collins is like, I mean, her mind, it kind of reminds me of the Game of Thrones world where even in Game of Thrones, the High Valyrian language that the author came up with is a language that people...
You can study it.
I think you can study it on Duolingo.
Yep, same with... that's crazy.
I'm pretty sure.
That's everything. Can we learn Valyrian on Duolingo?
Yes.
The next episode will be in Valyrian.
In High Valyrian, yes. Well, and the funny thing is, I was at a convention at Adweek in New York like last year, and they had some of the people that worked on the Game of Thrones, the new show, House of the Dragon. And they said that even when they had background actors like walking through the city scenes that were speaking High Valyrian to each other, they were so worried about getting the language right, even for background actors, because the Game of Thrones fandom has become so obsessed with it that they can clock in scenes when characters aren't pronouncing certain words right, or like High Valyrian isn't being grammatically spoken correct.
That's
and it's
insane.
A language that was made up.
But that is like such a, I don't know, like I kind of like when fandoms get that
Me too.
deep. It's so beautiful. I think my favorite part about any series is the world building. Like that's really what makes me fall in love with a series when there's so much like lore to this even fictional world. Like I think something about like Game of Thrones and Hunger Games that's so interesting is that there's history to the story before the story even begins. You know what I mean? Like it's the 75th Hunger Games. It's not the first Hunger Games. And this is like the 10th Hunger Games or whatever. And I just think that's so interesting. You know what I mean? That they're like putting you into this world that even predates like what you're reading. It's just so, it's such a crazy way that people can even like write like that.
I know that their mind is like that big and it brings people into the world. And we're going to talk about too the ending kind of the Hunger Games, and I'm not going to necessarily there might be spoilers in this episode if you guys really care about that kind of thing. Again, I'm also a believer in like if a book has been out for a while and the movie is based on a popular book, I'm like, yes, I'm going to be careful of spoilers, but also like just read the book if you like really, really want to know, because I'm sure it's a great book.
And also, I haven't seen it, so
right.
we're in it
we'll
together.
See. Yeah, and unpopular opinion, I love when people give me spoilers.
I love spoilers
Thank you.
too. Why do I want to see a movie if I don't know if it's going to be good or not?
Exactly.
I need you to give me the tea.
Yes.
Like, I don't need the whole plot, but just give me that piping hot, steaming little thing that's going to happen at the end, the sinister turn. And I want to watch the movie to figure it out.
Yes. Like if someone is telling me about a show, it goes in one ear, out the other. The moment they give me like a little spoiler alert and they tell me something that happens in a specific episode, I will watch it so intently to see the build up to that moment. And I love a spoiler.
Exactly. This actually very explicitly happened with me with House of Cards. We don't stand Kevin Spacey.
Yeah.
But the show House of Cards, where the spoiler alert, it's been out since 2013.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. The main character dies in season 1. And when someone told me that, I was like, oh, I need to watch it. Also, Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. I was another one.
Ned Stark. And Ned Stark. I knew that Ned Stark died before I started season 1 of Game of Thrones, but that like was what made me watch it.
Yes. It just, to me, it makes it so much more interesting to know what the stake is and what's going to happen, because then the build up. So the context of this is it's a prequel and it's focused on President Snow. Coriolanus Snow is his name in this series because he hadn't become president yet. He's like a college kid or a high school. He's a student in the Capitol, and it's him going from kind of a little bit jaded because bad things happened to his family during the uprising, but he's still kind of optimistic and open-minded and empathetic. Yeah. And then you just see him, like, the devolution of his character by the end of the movie, where he becomes so like unhinged and angry at the world. So it's about that. And of course they casted like the actor's name is Tom Blyth. And there's something so interesting about like British actors that play American characters. British actors are better at playing Americans than American. Like they're so good.
I mean, what do we do well?
Like Florence Pugh, for example, whenever I hear her accent, I'm like, wait, she's not. Like,
I just think we need to put Florence Pugh in every movie ever
I
made.
know.
She just needs a little cameo, a little scene.
The frown
like
face.
She's carrying every role that she's in. Dune, when Florence Pugh enters the Dune franchise, Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, and Florence Pugh in one movie.
Oh my God.
I'm going to lose my mind.
I know. Florence Pugh in Hello, Darling, I think, or Don't Worry, Darling. That was such a good movie.
That movie.
And it was such a good movie, and it got so much flack because people were just like, I think, so obsessed with Harry Styles, the singer, acting in the movie that which I thought he did an okay job. And like, I'm sorry, that could be a whole other episode. Don't Worry, Darling was a really good movie, and I stand by that.
I think so too.
Yeah. This Hunger Games is a prequel about Coriolanus Snow, and he has a relationship with one of the girls, Lucy Gray Baird, who is chosen for the reaping in the 10th Hunger Games. And they're all assigned a mentor, which is like Capitol students. In the movies that we see with Katniss Everdeen, it's people that have won.
Victors, yeah.
And then Lucy Gray Baird's character, which is played by Rachel Zegler, her whole thing is she's part of like a traveling family that goes throughout the districts that are very poor, like everyone. And their way of making money is they're performers. Like they sing folk songs on the street.
Circus.
Yes, like a circus kind of. And so her character's way of coping with things and getting out of situations is like performing. And she's also a character that's quite unpredictable and you don't really know what her intentions are. Another interesting thing about this movie specifically that I thought was kind of funny to see, but wasn't a job that I envied. So all of Panem and the Hunger Games takes place in a future America.
Oh, really?
It's supposed to be like if the world ends and it's like America is the only continent that exists in hundreds of years from now.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be hundreds of years from now. But because this movie was a prequel to the one that Jennifer Lawrence and, you know, they're in, it was supposed to be showing that it's like from the past. And so you could tell they wanted it to be like a period piece, and the outfits and the clothing and the style was very reminiscent of like late 20s, like flapper, that era, and then a mix of like the 30s Great Depression.
Interesting.
And even like the color scheme, but they still had to have technology that was like more advanced than now.
Yeah.
So they had these like FaceTime kind of machines that they would use, these dials that they would look in, and they had drones. That part of the plot was that the drones didn't really work well. So it was just funny seeing them try to depict futuristic technology, but as if it existed in our 1930s, 1920s context.
That's funny. I mean, even the original Hunger Games series is like kind of weirdly like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like they have spaceships, but for some reason all of District 12 is like mining with a pickaxe.
Yeah.
And like I think we could probably have a better system for this.
Where's Xenon when you need her?
Right.
Well, and my thing too is I think it's really hard to do futuristic movies and stories. It's really an interesting thing, but you can never do it without it looking kind of corny, because it's like you're predicting, and I'm not saying Hunger Games is corny at all. I'm just saying like when you look back at movies and stuff that were like, oh, by like 2020, we're going to have hover cars and everyone's going to fly. And that doesn't happen, you know?
Totally, like Back to the Future.
Yeah.
But I think the reason they used like this futuristic technology for the Capitol only is to kind of create this like visual stark contrast that you're supposed to relate with the district people. And you don't relate with the Capitol people. Like the district people don't have access to this technology and they don't use it. So you feel like, oh, they're the working class. Like they embody the same experience I do. But the Capitol has this entire like advanced system, and their cities are advanced and everything. So it's like they're like this utopic future society while you're somehow relating to this very modern society of the districts at the same time.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And also just how it is in real life. I was looking at a few theories online, and one of the theories that Hunger Games fans have about the franchise is Panem is supposed to be the country that exists. It's a future America, as if all of the other countries in the world were ruined in a huge war. But the idea is that what if that's just propaganda, so that the districts don't try to seek out help from outsiders or leave because like they're told that like the world doesn't exist.
That's like kind of like the plot of Divergent. Yeah.
Like telling them like, oh, we don't have that.
That's interesting.
Outside help. So just a thought. Now, I want to get into a few more theories about the movie, and then we'll get into casting. One that was really interesting to me is Rachel Zegler, in an interview that she did, she said the difference between Katniss and then her character Lucy is that Katniss is a fighter who was forced to perform, but Lucy is a performer who was forced to fight.
That's good.
And it's so accurately like depicted in the movie.
Yeah.
And you even saw it with Katniss's character in previous Hunger Games, where she didn't seem to like being in like the public eye or like the parades that they had to do.
She was very resistant to it, but she was kind of good at it.
Yes.
Like she was good at being this rebellious force because she kind of was inherently
surviving.
Surviving, and had this like resent against authority, and you know what I mean? That's really, really interesting. Yeah.
And you kind of see that in the movie where Lucy Gray, she is a really good performer and really thrives in the lead up to the Hunger Games. Like they have to basically, in this version of the Hunger Games, they put all of the tributes in a zoo, in like a cage, and people from the Capitol can come up to the zoo and like look at them training for their Hunger Games.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and so you see Lucy Gray really thriving in those moments where there's cameras there and she's singing, and they have to perform to get donations. Like it's like American Idol. Like you want to like call in and vote for your favorite.
No, literally.
So she would need donations. So she was really good at like singing songs, and but then when the bell goes off and the fighting starts in the Capitol, she's like
doesn't know what to do.
Freezes. Yeah. Right. So that was an interesting thing. And then another one is that I know you had kind of mentioned it because you saw a video that the woman who is in the later Hunger Games franchise who overthrows President Snow.
Hunger Games fans have a theory that Lucy Gray is actually the president of District 13 in the Hunger Games movies. And that is why she has so much like resentment against President Snow and why she's so antagonistic against him. And there's like a lot of weird similarities. Like one of them is, how on earth would the president of District 13 know how much the symbol of the Mockingjay meant to President Coin unless she was the girl?
Yeah.
Like there's just these weird instances where it seems like she intentionally sets up Katniss to kind of have weird parallels and resemblances to Lucy Gray, who's also from District 12. And I think also, if you think about it, in the way of the original books, Katniss gets to District 13 because she can escape through the fence and they're right next to each other. So it does make sense, literally geographically, like in the standpoint that if Lucy Gray was to escape, that she would be going to, or hiding somewhere, it would be the next district over, which is 13.
Yeah. And so I think that it could be true. I've heard theories, and the reason that none of these theories are confirmed, I'm going to get into right after this, but that it could be Lucy Gray's daughter. That if she had a daughter, the age range would line up with presidents. Like
that makes sense.
Yeah. And the belief is that Lucy Gray maybe escaped to District 13 at the end of this movie. And if she had a daughter, then it would be understandable that she would teach the daughter about what President Snow had done to her. Or
even if it's not her daughter, just like Lucy Gray got to District 13 and told the story.
The end of the movie, kind of a spoiler here, it's Lucy Gray and Coriolanus Snow. They're kind of a couple. They're kind of vibing. And they're trying to figure out like where to go. She's in District 12. He gets sent to District 12 as a peacemaker, which is like their military. Right. And the two of them are figuring out what to do. They're hiding in a cabin, and she just like leaves and disappears, and he gets mad. He doesn't know where she went, and he's just shooting all the mockingjays, and he thinks he's seeing her, but it could be a hallucination, and he's trying to shoot at her and kill her because he's so angry that she would leave him in the cabin alone. And so it ends like that. Like the movie, you don't really know what happened. And I think why this is so brilliant, because they've asked Susan Collins, like, are you going to make another book about Lucy Gray and what happens to her? And she hasn't really said whether she's going to or not. But that I think it's so much better, because I left the theater dissatisfied because I was like, we don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But I realized, what I realized is that that's how life is. Like there's been so many times where you'll be in a relationship with someone or like dating someone, and they just stop talking, and you're like, what happened? Like you just never know what happened to them.
Most of life doesn't have a satisfying conclusion.
Yeah, or any conclusion at all.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of loose ends. And that's exactly how the movie felt. And so there could be a chance that Lucy Gray went to District 13, or you just never really know. And maybe there's a possibility that they'll do another book and then another movie. So that's still in the cards. We don't know yet. And Rachel Zegler has said like she hopes that could be in the cards. So with that being said, I do want to get now into the casting, because I think that was what was really interesting. Speaking of the books, Rachel Zegler in 2021, so this was around the time that she was starting to grow a fan base from West Side Story, and I want to get into her backstory too as well. But she tweeted in January of 2021, right when the prequel book came out by Susan Collins, she was talking about how much she loved the book and like how great Susan Collins is. Yeah. And then one of her fans replied to her tweet. The fan's name is Nicole Ackman. I'm going to have a screenshot up. And she said, at 5:10 a.m. on January 18th, 2021, Rachel Zegler as Lucy Gray in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes movie, When? Which is crazy because Rachel Zegler, I don't even know, had auditioned for the movie at this point. I don't even know if they were publicly talking about the movie being made, like the book being made into a movie. And so that fan like put it out into the world. And then Rachel Zegler ended up getting cast.
I'm a big believer that you gotta like speak things into existence, even if not from like a manifestation standpoint. I'm just like, no one's a mind reader. Yeah. And I think generally you assume most people in your life like know what you're thinking or how you're feeling, and really they're just kind of oblivious. Yes. But I think it's like, if you want to be in a Hunger Games movie, you got to tell somebody.
Yes.
You know what I mean? If you're an actress, like you're never going to get it unless you tell someone, but you never know. Like someone from the casting team might have seen that tweet or whatever, and that's how things work.
And it truly was one of those things where I feel like Rachel Zegler was like meant to play this role in so many ways that I'm going to get into. But one, like her voice she's such a good singer. I'm like, pop album when? Like, we need it. But no, she's such a good singer. She had read the Hunger Games book, including the new one, and was a fan of it. Like she genuinely loved the franchise. And now I want to get into why she initially turned down the role.
Okay.
But I think it's one of those things where when you're truly meant to do something, it finds you.
Yeah.
And there's no mistake that you can make. There's no, like, yes, you can do bad things, but like there's truly nothing that can stop. Like if you came into this life to do something, it's always going to find you no matter what.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm an optimist. So Rachel Zegler initially turned down the role of Lucy Gray. She had been going through the audition process. And the way they described the chemistry test that she did with Tom Blyth, the guy who played Coriolanus Snow, was so awkward. And it's why I commend actors because they don't have an easy job.
Yeah, I could never.
They really don't. So what they did is right when they started talking to Rachel Zegler, they knew they wanted her to be Lucy Gray. And this was the director, Francis Lawrence, talked about it in an interview. It was with Business Insider. Anyways, they had to get onto a Zoom call to do a chemistry read. And I think it was more to see if Tom Blyth would be perfect for Coriolanus Snow. He was a new actor that just came out of Juilliard in the UK, but he was like, I think this was his really big role.
Yeah.
They went on a Zoom call and everyone else turned their cameras off. And Tom Blyth just had to sit there and watch Rachel Zegler sing.
Oh, that's weird.
It's so awkward.
I would be so uncomfortable.
And that's why I commend actors because that's hard.
Oh, I could never walk into any sort of audition room.
I know.
My fear of rejection, I would just cry.
Imagine your ability to get a life-changing job that will completely change the trajectory of everything is how you listen to someone sing on Zoom. Like just muted. You're just like great
even
to
on
them.
Zoom, not even in real life.
I know.
That's crazy.
Even harder on Zoom.
Yeah.
So is he even looking in the right direction? It makes me think of that one meme. I don't know if you've seen it's like all of these actors got together to sing this like inspirational, like it's one of those songs like we are the world, we are the children. And someone goes, who told Usher he was going to be in the middle? And it's almost like the Brady Bunch where it's like all of these screens pop up and all the singers are just, but Usher's in like the bottom corner and he's like,
yeah.
And they put him in the bottom corner.
Yes, I've seen this video.
So that just makes me think of like a Zoom audition. Like, where do you even look? But anyways, so they loved they thought they had great chemistry. But Rachel Zegler, when she got the role, turned it down because she was currently filming Snow White in London. And it was like peak pandemic, COVID, everything shut down. The set was really strict. And Francis Lawrence in an interview said that she was in a very isolated, like there aren't a ton of people in the Snow White movie. So she was already alone, quarantining on set, was away from her family. She's from New Jersey. And she was just so lonely in London. And they told her the filming schedule for Hunger Games. And she would have to go, the shooting for Snow White wraps 3 days later, they began shooting Hunger Games.
Wow.
So she would have to fly from London to Germany and go even further into Europe for another like however many months to film the Hunger Games. And she was super homesick. She like was isolated.
I mean, it's also like packing up your entire life in 3 days and like moving to another country for a few months.
Yeah. And so she just wanted to go back home. She was like, I can't, like, I have to go home. I can't do this.
Yeah.
But what happened is unrelated to her, Zegler's boyfriend, Josh Rivera, he was cast as Sejanus in the movie, who's another really big character. He's Snow's best friend. And Francis Lawrence said it had nothing to do with Rachel. They cast him separately. And when she found out through her boyfriend that he was going to do the Hunger Games, she was like, oh, like there's a light. She's like, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe I could do it if you're also on set with me. So she said that, or Francis Lawrence said they were like scrambling. Like they were about to start shooting in a few days and they didn't have their lead.
Whoa.
Because they wanted Rachel Zegler. They were like, who's going to be her? No one can be her. We don't know who we're going to have. So they were scrambling, trying to get a Lucy Gray. And Rachel called him a few days before filming and was like, do you guys still need someone for Lucy Gray? And he was like, yes. And Francis Lawrence in the interview didn't say she was so lucky we hadn't. He goes, we were so lucky that she reached back out.
Yeah.
That's how good she was in this role.
Wow.
And so she went to Poland and Germany to film because she was now with her boyfriend. And I don't know. I think it's like such a serendipitous story. It's one of those things that like you couldn't do that if you tried. Like what are the odds that they
and
would
it's
both
also,
get it?
I mean, even crazy to like, it's admirable that she knew her boundaries well enough to reject it. Like the lead in a Hunger Games movie.
I know.
Like that is such a massive franchise. It's one of those things that like you set yourself up by just doing one of those movies.
Yes. And also her boyfriend, Josh Rivera, he's so good in the movie too. So it clearly was not like a pity, like, oh, we just need your girlfriend. It was like he got the role separate from her. And it just makes so much sense. Also said, I was just listening to her on a podcast called Ladies Night where she was talking about filming Hunger Games. And she said that because she was filming Snow White in the lead up, all of the other actors that would be in the arena with her fighting, they had weeks of stunt training to get ready, but she didn't because she was, and she said that she thinks it kind of helps them.
I was going to think that too, because it does really depict the helpless, I've never fought in my life. Yeah. Now I'm in a death match.
That's exactly what she said. She said that she was just there dodging everyone because she had no idea what the stunts were. And so they just filmed her genuine reaction to being like, oh my God, like everyone's coming at me. What do I do?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. And then I want to just talk about too is the, I want to get into kind of her first origin and then we'll get into the Jacob Elordi and Rachel Zegler comparisons because I know we have some thoughts. So one of my favorite stories that I always look into is like actors and getting their first role. I know Millie Bobby Brown is really kind of inspiring because she was trying to make it in acting. She'd been in like one film, but it wasn't like a big breakout role when she was a kid. And she was getting ready to pack up her bags and leave LA with her family and go back to the UK because she wasn't getting anything. Wow. And she really wanted this one role in Game of Thrones that ended up going to the actor in The Last of Us.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
It was so it was between the two of them.
Wow, she does look like Millie Bobby Brown, kind of.
Yeah, right?
That's funny.
Yes, and it didn't go to Millie Bobby Brown.
Wow.
And so Millie Bobby Brown was crying and upset and was getting ready to just leave and go back to the UK. And then her agent was like, hey, like, can you do a really quick tape for this show called Stranger Things? And she'd been crying all day. So she's like, fine. Like, so she filmed the audition for 11 and it was a very raw emotion and she had to cry in the scene. And that was the role that she got and changed her life.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, sometimes life just like throws bad things at you because it's going to clear the way for something better.
Exactly.
Like I'm a big believer in that sometimes you feel like a situation is crumbling or something bad is happening and you're like, why is there this?
It has to cleanse the palate.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like when you're like smelling perfumes and you have to smell like the coffee when you're but it like cleanses the palate.
Exactly. Because like had she gotten that role, she can't audition for the other one.
Yeah.
And Stranger Things is like the lead in Stranger Things is way bigger.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And so for Rachel Zegler, she was from New Jersey. She grew up doing musicals and she had a very musical training. And she said that she was a wedding singer on weekends, just trying to make ends meet. And she even went in for an audition for a Broadway musical in New York. And it was super discouraging because during her audition, the casting directors took that time to order lunch amongst themselves. So they weren't even listening to her.
Oh my God. See, I could never audition like this.
There's actors are so brave.
I would just start crying on the stage.
I know. And so she was super disheartened. But a week later, she found out that she was cast in Steven Spielberg's West Side Story.
Wow.
Mind you, wasn't a big name from this. She sent in a YouTube link of her just reading the script.
Yeah.
An unlisted YouTube link to a random email that they had on the website. And 30,000 other girls auditioned for that role. And she got chosen. So she found out a week after that Broadway audition that she got picked for a Steven Spielberg movie.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that leads me to the Jacob Elordi and Rachel Zegler comparison.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she did an interview on a red carpet where they asked her why she took a role in this DC Shazam movie. Kind of like they ask all of them, why did you want the role?
Right.
Like, and they're always like, I love the character. It was like, I love the cast, everything. But she had a very straightforward answer and was like, I needed work. Like I needed a job. And she went on to say it that got clipped where she was just like, I need a job. End scene.
Yeah.
But in it, she said, West Side Story hadn't come out yet. And so I was just trying to get any work I could because she wasn't a household name yet.
Uh-huh.
So that got clipped. She was reamed, dragged through the mud. Jacob Elordi went viral because
Lilo and Stitch.
Yes. And the kissing booth thing where he got asked, how do you pick your roles? And he said, I play what they give me. I need a job. And everyone's, oh, he's so #real king behavior.
I have like lots of thoughts about this from multiple standpoints. I do definitely think there's some bit of, like the big elephant in the room, misogyny, to it. Like I definitely think that's a huge part of it.
And intersectional because she's POC and he's white, and it's
that's
like there's
that's
other
what I
too.
was gonna get to, was like I think that is part of it specifically for the Disney situation, like the Snow White situation. I think that she, like some of the clips she was going a little hard in dissing Snow White. And like, I'm not going to say Snow White's the best story ever told, but people do have this weird obsession with Disney stories.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's something about how like you infantilize the character because when you saw it, you were also 5.
Yeah.
So you kind of like relate to it in that way. But it's also so like, I just do not get why there's such a weird resentment against any POC by POC person playing a fictional character.
I know.
Like what? It's not real. Like it's not even a real person. Like it is just, there's no other reason than it's just like subtle racism, I think.
Oh,
of
yeah.
when people do that. Cause like also like Halle Berry in Little Mermaid 8. She was so good. Like you can't like
the way that she changed like the tune in Part of Your World, like the way that she sang it was so unique.
Yeah, and not even beyond just the singing, like the
Yeah.
acting. Like Ariel's really supposed to be like really young and naive, and I felt like she really did that well. And like, I don't understand what the weird criticism was.
And it was before the scenes came out, so people weren't even critiquing her as an actor; they were critiquing her as a person.
Right. Well, I think it's because the way she gave some interviews implied that they were changing the story a lot.
Oh, for Snow White.
For Snow White, where she was like, this is not your mom's Snow White and blah, blah, blah. And like, and was like talking about how there's like kind of like misogyny in the story and, you know, like the dwarves, but also Snow White's like, I don't think she said this, but like Snow White is kind of a matriarch to the dwarf. I don't know. It's a weird thing. But like, and I think people just saw that and were like, so eager, especially hyper conservative people, are so eager to like, this is ridiculous. People are going, woke culture is going to, you know what I mean? Like they love to toot that horn. So, and then the fact that she is a woman and POC on top of it is like the perfect storm for.
I even saw like racist takes on her skin tone where they're like Snow White. I was like, hello.
She's not real.
It's not real.
She is not
like,
real.
She was made using like probably a Crayola crown. Like it's
I don't get it. It's just like I also cannot understand why people feel so personally attacked in those situations.
I know.
Like who cares?
Just watch the original if you think the story is
like if you don't like it, don't watch it.
Yeah.
Nobody's forcing you.
Yeah.
And going back to the Jacob Elordi thing, like I think part of it is a bit in the way it was delivered. Like Jacob Elordi kind of delivered it in a bit more of a nonchalant-y way where she kind of was very direct about it. Yeah. And I guess to some people it felt like antagonizing a bit. But I also, like, especially for the Shazam thing, I don't think people understand that, like, just because you're an actor does not mean you're instantly rich.
Yeah.
Like, or just because you've gotten one, like, it's her second role ever. Like, she's not rich. Also, there's a lot of the times you don't get paid all of the money up front. It comes in checks, it comes in residuals, it comes in month to month. Like, so her saying, yeah, I needed to take this job, like, it's a DC movie. It's not a deep character that she's going to connect to. Like, it's like the whole point of it is to be superficial and like borderline science fiction, action, adventure, etc. Like, it's not a deep plot. So she's not going to have a deep attachment to the character.
Yeah.
So like, that's when I think it's like, okay, chill. You know what I mean?
Yes, I agree.
And I think Jacob Elordi had the benefit of also maybe because he was already established a bit more is another thing that I think. Also, I'm not trying to say that like this is not because of misogyny and racism. I do believe that's what it is. I'm also like just trying to like paint the picture of all the
multiple
factors of why I think people like. I think by that point, Jacob Elordi had been in the Kissing Booths. He'd been in Euphoria, his biggest role, and then he was like, you know, once he was taken seriously, it's like okay to do that. But I think when you're in this like not okay to do that, but in the public sense, and I think like because she's so new, it's like, well, you've only had 2 movies and you're making fun of both of them. Like, shut, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's why people are weirdly offended. But again, like, why are you so personally attacked by like somebody saying that they have a job to do?
I know. Yeah. Did you see how Jacob Elordi said that he didn't know much about Elvis before filming?
Yeah, and that he had only heard of it from Lilo and Stitch. But I think this is kind of a genius move.
I said it was a PR move.
Yeah, because it sets yourself up perfectly. If you lower the bar, either you do good as Elvis, which he did, and everyone's like, whoa, he was so good. Like, he's such a great actor. He could portray this character when he knew so little about it. But then if you suck in the role, it's like you're lowering the bar early.
You did all that
nobody.
for this.
So then everybody's like, oh, well, he just didn't know Elvis. And like, he wasn't, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I think you see the reverse with Austin Butler. Like, Austin Butler set the bar so high. Like, I didn't talk to my family for 3 years because I was
doing interviews
method
like
acting and
these.
character, and I had to change my voice, blah, blah, blah. So, like, Austin Butler wasn't bad, but I didn't watch this and was like, wow, you're really, thank God you didn't talk to your family for 3 years. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, I think you would have been fine talking to your family. Like, it was just a role. And I like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's also why Austin Butler like had reverse criticism of what's happening with Jacob Elordi, where Jacob Elordi is like celebrated for not knowing anything, and Austin Butler set the bar so high that everyone's like,
confidence.
yeah, literally. Like,
I think also that it was a strategic move because Jacob Elordi played a very negative portrayal of Elvis in the movie.
Yeah,
but Austin Butler's was a very positive portrayal. And I bet you Jacob Elordi and his team, whether it was really created or not, they probably did give him this narrative of you're playing somewhat of a villain. You can't go into it being like,
really
I
good
love
at playing
him.
villains.
Yeah, and a kind of a villain you root for. And he probably couldn't go into it being like gung-ho, like, I love this guy.
Yeah.
Also, hot take, like, I watched the Elvis with Austin Butler the night after we watched.
Did you?
I hated it.
It wasn't that good.
Everything felt like it was filmed in a studio. Like, none of the scenes seemed real.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of Baz Luhrmann's like style a bit. Like, it's very like that.
I couldn't tell if it's because I took an edible, but I was like,
maybe that's it.
Okay.
But my problem with the Elvis movie was it was so focused. Like, it's just clearly an Elvis movie written by an Elvis fan, not like let's actually depict his life story, both the good and the bad. And that's why also what I was really telling you after I saw Priscilla was it felt like they were 2 parts of the same movie. Like, they really are good together. And I don't think that was intentional at all, but it really like the Priscilla movie fills in a lot of the blanks of the Elvis movie in terms of a lot of like, they talk about the drug use and stuff like that or substance abuse, but they don't, like, they never go specifically. It's just like, oh, I gotta visit the doctor again. You know what I mean? Like, he has these weird vague lines that are like clearly referring to it. But then when you see the Priscilla movie, it's clearly such a big part of his life. And like, I don't know. I wish that they had depicted more of that because I think that that's like a really important part of why he died so early even and stuff too. Like it's part of the tragedy of Elvis was like he was so famous that he was kind of taken advantage of and didn't know how to handle it. And he wasn't not a good person pretty clearly, but I do still think a lot of the things that happened to him are sad and tragic and not okay. And it just felt like let's only talk about the good things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And yeah, I didn't like it. It just felt very a one-dimensional depiction of him. And
I will say though, I do think Jacob Elordi had an easier role.
Yeah.
Because he never really had to depict any sort of other emotion besides being the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like
that's
he
true.
kind of, and honestly, not even that. He was like, a big part of it was to be very distant, you know, like he would be in a scene with Priscilla, but he's with all the boys and she's just like kind of sitting next to him at the table. Yeah. And I did feel like Austin Butler had to like depict the scene when his mom died. You know what I mean? And like that's a lot harder to do as an actor, or like the depression he felt when he thought his music career was over and he was literally sent overseas, like and enlisted. Like that's a hard thing. I wouldn't know how to act that out. You know what I mean? So I do think that like when people make the comparison between Austin Butler and Jacob Elordi, it's a little unfair because Jacob Elordi didn't have to do any of that really emotionally challenging work.
Yeah.
But I do still think Jacob Elordi is better.
That kind of ties up this part about, I wanted to talk about casting and then tie it into Rachel Zegler versus Jacob Elordi, who got a lot of backlash she did for saying the same thing that both of them said. But now that we just have like a few minutes left at the end, something that is very relevant that I got comments about, I'm sure you did too. It's been the talk of the town, was just to end it on this note, and let us know in the comments too if there's ever things that are happening in pop culture that are very recent that you want us to kind of touch on the last few minutes of every pod.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
I'd love for this to be like a conversational, like Wendy Williams Hot Topics is on my favorite, but like not in a gossipy way, just more in our perspective behind the scenes in the industry. Matt Rife. You know what's so funny? I talked about this in a TikTok, and I want to say the podcast, but you guys can look at my TikTok. People accurately guessed it in the comments. He went on a podcast that we both love and we watch, and it's two girl hosts.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Their vibe was so weird with him in a way that they have not acted towards other guests. And they were hyping up Matt Rife coming on their podcast. Yeah. And he's very similar in the way they were hyping him up and talking about him to Trevor Wallace, another comedian. But their dynamic with Matt Rife compared to Trevor Wallace was so odd.
Different.
And it almost seems like they were closed off and almost afraid in a way, or like something maybe happened. And I don't know. That's why I'm not saying the name of the podcast, because I don't want to put words in their mouth. You never know. But they just seem so closed off, like something had happened behind the scenes that put them off to him.
Maybe. I mean, I also think he's just kind of
off-putting.
An off-putting guy. Yeah. Like the whole Matt Rife thing is so interesting to me as to how this like perfect storm brewed for him to like be experiencing this cancellation. One, obviously the special is terrible. Like you've seen the things he said. They're crazy. Like the domestic violence, when I saw the clip about the domestic, when he was like, you shouldn't have come to work.
And then he was like, oh, if she knew how to cook, she wouldn't have a black eye.
And he's like, I just wanted to see if you were a fun audience.
Fun?
What's fun about that? What's fun about beating women? Could you please elaborate more?
Yeah, let's dive in there.
So that's like, obviously, the big, 10,000 pound elephant in the room. Another thing that I think is really interesting about this Matt Rife situation is for most people, it is the first time they've ever seen him actually do comedy. All of his TikToks are crowd work. And he's actually talked about this in interviews. And he says that he does that because he's like, well, if I show the material of the show in
they won't come.
20 TikToks, then the show material doesn't change. So if they see 20 TikToks of my show, then they pay for my show. They're hearing jokes that they've already heard before. And that I think is actually a genuinely great point as to why he's like, I don't want to post clips of the show. However, because of the fact that he only does crowd work where he's really only interacting with women because he knows how to use his looks to like be funny and flirt. It's like, I mean, it is funny to see like a younger man like flirt, like, and a mom in the audience like jokingly flirting with each other and stuff like that. Like it's amusing, but because of that, like no one actually knew really if he was funny in this like scripted sense, right? Like clearly he had like the wit to banter with somebody, but I think that is just this whole other thing where it's like, because he was doing this audience banter where it really leaned into his looks, where he was pretty much only talking to women, he built this very, very large female audience. And then when his true values came out, that was very misogynistic, very racist, ableist, like every ist you can think of.
Check them all off.
And like that it was like this like I think that's why it got so much attention so quickly, because so much people did not have this perception of him prior. Like to them, he was just this funny, flirty guy. You know what I mean? Like I just think that that's interesting. Whereas something like other comedians who are like notoriously terrible, at the very least they get this audience because like
they're actually funny.
Well, they're also terrible from day one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the people that are going to go to their show are okay with whatever domestic violence joke or whatever they're going to make.
Yeah, you make such great points. And I think that the Matt Rife situation is one of the few examples as people who work in marketing. And my whole thing is your life can change from TikTok. And we always say that one quote that's like, it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. And I'm always rooting for people who have worked at a craft and blowing up overnight, quotations, because of TikTok or whatever app is going to come next. But I think that Matt Rife felt like a really good example of, yes, he's worked at his craft for a very, very long time. Yeah. But he almost is like the downside of TikTok and internet fame.
Yes.
Where he got this huge opportunity like Netflix before he was trained enough to know what to do with it.
And fumbled it.
And there are probably so many comedians out there who would freaking kill a Netflix special and do so good, but they don't know how to do TikTok.
Yeah.
They don't know how to do YouTube. They don't know how to do a podcast. They're never going to get that opportunity. And I think he's such a good example of biting off more than you can chew. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. Biting off more than you can chew because your audience gave you an opportunity that you were not ready for.
Yeah, and I hate when a situation like this happens, because then I think for a while the industry gets really closed off to working with any sort of creator. Like, oh, the Matt Rife special failed. I guess we just shouldn't do comedy with TikTokers. And it's like, no, you just shouldn't do comedy with Matt Rife. Yeah. Like, I felt this way really strongly about the Hype House show.
Yes.
Where I felt like it was just a bad show, right? Like there just wasn't really a plot to it, right? Like whatever writers, whatever, it just wasn't good. No hate to any of the people involved. Yeah. But then I felt like it's like, people are like, see, this is why TikTokers shouldn't be on TV. And I'm like, no, I think that there are some really talented people out there who make content about acting and are actors or are just funny and amusing and would be great in an unscripted series like that, because they just are quick and have that banter. But I'm like, just because it wasn't this group doesn't mean you need to make an assumption about the entire population of that like career or creator, whatever. And that's why I think it sucks when you see these situations, because it ends up hurting like the entirety of the industry in ways that, you know, like you're not going to see a TikToker get a big comedy special for 6 months to a year. I guarantee
I know.
Like you won't. Like maybe there will be a few that come out that have already been filmed and stuff. Like I know Trevor Wallace actually has one on Amazon Prime right now. And I don't know. It's just like, that's what I really think about in situations like this. It's like, it sucks that one person messes it up for everybody else who's working hard to get there.
Even though I don't think it was her fault directly, Lily Singh, her late night show is such a good example of
that
late
happening.
Night, they haven't touched a YouTuber with a 10-foot pole.
Yep.
Since that, because again, I don't think it was her fault at all. I think various factors set her up to fail.
Yeah.
But it hurt the influencer world because it was this proof, I guess, to the industry that like an internet audience couldn't translate over.
Totally. Like another thing I felt this about too is like when all the James Charles situations came out, and then all of these, like, it was a good thing that there was like a male cover girl at one point and stuff. Like that was cool. It was cool to advertise that like men in makeup. It's just like this one person isn't good. That doesn't mean that you should also write off Bretman Rock or whatever.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like there are other good people out there. And you see a lot of the times, like after the James Charles situation, you know, a lot of these makeup companies pulled back for a while. And, you know, I don't know.
Totally. Well, I guess we'll end there. This was like such a great episode. I loved kind of the conversational of
Me too.
the end as well.
It was kind of like a this almost like this week in pop culture
Yes.
recap. Like we talked about Hunger Games, we talked about Jacob Elordi, talked about Saltburn, and we talked about Matt Rife. And I feel like that's like what's been going on this week.
Yes, marketing experts react. I want to like make that like a real series for us because there's so many react series, but there's no marketing experts react.
Me too.
So with all of that being said, again, thank you guys so much for watching or listening. However you guys consume us, we appreciate you so much. If you guys give us a rating, if you send us to a friend who also loves pop culture and marketing as much as you do and we do, we'd love to all chat.
Kiki, let's Kiki. Sub to the channel if you haven't.
Yeah.
And thank you all for stopping in. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.